Right, key highlights, I suppose, that form part of our conversation tonight in our weekly feature, in which looks at big stories which have dominated headlines in the past 7 days and possibly in the coming week as well. Here to help me unpack some of these stories, we're joined in studio by social commentator Lorato Tsekeng, media monitoring managing director William Bird, and political analyst Professor Pete Krokamp. Remember, we're also asking you tonight to engage with us and give us your thought. Commissions, ad hoc committee sittings, raids by the SIU, raids by the Hawks. Are these inspiring confidence in you in as far as dealing with corruption in the country? 072-110-5584. Call us 010-594-6010. Otherwise, engage with us on X at Newzroom 405. Gentlemen, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming to be a part of our conversation tonight. Let me start here in the studio with you, Lorato. I mean, exactly from what Tate Bloom is saying there, I wanted to actually begin there as our point of departure. The performance of the lawmakers. I mean, we are a country of commissions, we are told, and ad hoc committee inquiries, SIU raids, Hawks raids, but very little in the way of actual outcomes of people in orange overalls. How do you feel about the performance of the committee in terms of non-partisan, in terms of the quality of the probing that we saw? Remember, they are already on the back foot, right? Sure. The Madlanga Commission heard that the police portfolio committee didn't do very well from the appearance of the SAPS. One of the members of that particular committee is implicated in some kind of misdemeanor of some sort.
Good evening, Thabo, and good evening to the viewers, and good evening to the fellow panelists. A couple of things, right? One, the trouble is that anything that is said in front of politicians, it will always be out of political interest. And you could see the line of questioning. Take the Mkondo Wesizwe party, for instance. Firstly, we know that they had taken a case, to the Constitutional Court, where they had wanted to almost, or at least they were raising the issue of the employment or the hiring of the now minister. And you know that you could even tell their line of questioning. It was not helping us as the citizens. Secondly, and most importantly, there were a lot of questions that were, in the line of, General, in your opinion, right? And that does not help us. Instead, it creates a lot more of speculation than saying, what are the facts? So that they help us to, as the public, to say, as we understand governance, as we understand policing as a function that, is, implemented by police officials on the ground, run by commissioners, but also governed by a minister. How should South Africans understand as far as facts are concerned? Unfortunately, or at least in my own assessment, I think they were playing a lot more to the public gallery than, it was helping us. The good thing, though, how it started in terms of ensuring that, when Julius Malema raised the issue that looked a little bit more technical, I think it helped, because that could have been another thing where they would have been seen as, you guys constituted this commission. However, you did not even observe your own rules. Yeah. So I think that was a good thing. The second good thing really was that they worked until the wee hours of the night, right? Which then told us that they showed a little bit of agency, which we know ordinarily, if you go to any public service, a lot of us expect that when it's tea time, they will go to tea. When it's lunch, people will tell you that it's lunch. And it was giving some sort of confidence that there's an intention of some sort to want to get to some finality.
Yeah. Prof, when the president announced the commission, the Madlanga Commission, I spoke to a lot of politicians, including the ones that you mentioned from the MK party. They said, look, it's a waste of money. The right platform to have probed this matter is Parliament, and there we would not have spent millions on it. Did they accord themselves correctly in terms of that assertion that this indeed is the correct platform? Did we get something out of this, for example, they are probing, that we didn't hear in the Madlanga Commission, for example, as far as the testimony of both the police commissioner and the KZN police commissioner?
Look, there will always be detail that will come to the fore at a political forum such as the ad hoc committee, which might be trivial, insignificant, political grandstanding, etc. But I think Julius Malema did a good job. I think he did well. I think the same goes for Glynis Breitenbach. I do think that they've done a reasonable job in asking good questions, asking the right questions. And of course, they're also being led in terms of what they should be asking or can ask by the testimony of Mkhwanazi, Masemola, and tomorrow, I think perhaps the one that we're all looking forward to is that of Sibiya. But the ad hoc committee is very, very different from the Commission of Inquiry, the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. They might even have a very different purpose and serve a different function. And we shouldn't be confusing the two, or I think even comparing them. It's more of a legal process. Eventually, the decisions will be made more of. There's a different line of questioning, a different, I think, purpose to the Madlanga Commission, and that is that eventually they will have to write a report that can stand up in a court of law, that should serve a particular sense of a deeper understanding.
Yeah.
It's not the same. It's not the same process and procedure.
Different line of questioning, Prof. Different line of questioning, but is it helpful? Is it a helpful line of questioning? Is it helping us get deeper?
Yes, it's all helpful. Yeah. Look, I think you need cross-examination, which you don't have, and then of course you need evidence. And at this stage, it's all the word of one person against another one. Tomorrow we will hear Sibiya's version, but I don't think we will necessarily see the evidence yet. That might be a very different process. And now that some people have been charged and some people have been arrested and some people have been searched, it could be that some of these evidence become part of an investigation which cannot necessarily be divulged in the ad hoc committee until if there's a investigation, concurrent investigation going. Even the Madlanga Commission may come up to that question. Can be divulged information here which may eventually end up being part of the investigation and the court procedure. So from a public perspective, it is a bit confusing. It is difficult to unravel exactly where the one process starts, where the other one begins, and the extent to which they overlay. But it is very informative. It does inform us to the extent that we now know some of the things that we've always been saying, always been hearing, that's been written in various books about what is going on just beneath the surface of South African politics, the corruption, the crime, the violence, the link, the overlay between politics and organized crime. We now hear some of these things firsthand, which we've seen in writing, we've seen it in investigative reports, we've seen it in research reports. And now we actually hear it from the people that are named, but we didn't have access to in the past.
Yes. William, let's talk about what we're hearing, as Prof says, under the surface. I mean, this ad hoc committee was literally asked to set up a joint standing committee on intelligence and task the state security apparatus to conduct a counterintelligence investigation against South Africa's news media.
Sorry, it is one of those extraordinary things in South Africa where every day you can't kind of believe what's real and what isn't. We know for a fact that journalists before this were targeted by state security. They had their devices listened again without any justification, and I think we need to be clear on a few things. There are certain things that, of course, the state must make sure are kept secret. There are certain things that should be, certain kinds of information that should be kept classified. Against that, there are also clearly and overwhelmingly clearly instances where, because media have been able to get access to information through whistleblowers, through getting access to other kinds of classified or confidential documents, we've been able to, our media have been able to expose significant levels of wrongdoing, from the Gupta leaks to all sorts of, Babita Dukaran is a classic example. Had she not blown the whistle on that information, which is in many instances they may have considered confidential, then we wouldn't have known about any of this. And that's the Tembisa Hospital, and that ties all of it, back to these kinds of things. So for them to be then going and saying we need to be targeting journalists is something that I think we need to be taking very seriously. We need to be deeply concerned about it. There may be instances where, again, and this is why the particular piece of legislation was found to be clearly and egregiously unconstitutional was when the state decides that it needs to tap into someone's devices, that they need to be able to take that before a judge, that it needs to be heard, that the person ideally has to be informed about it at some point. I mean, obviously, if there's someone who's going to be carrying out criminal acts, you can't do that immediately, but you need to have all sorts of checks and balances there. What we're seeing is effectively a state that is behaving in a complete rogue action, you know, the state security, and these sorts of allegations have been going around for years. As Mr. Krokamp has argued just before this, you know, these things have been written about extensively by journalists, you know, and yet only now are some of these things kind of coming again into the public domain in a political sense, where the politicians are seeming to be shocked and appalled by the things that we're hearing. Again, much of this stuff has already been in the public domain but not written about. But when we are hearing people saying we need to be targeting journalists for that, we need to be very, very concerned about those particular claims.
William, do you think it would be in the honors of the General Mkhwanazi to present that evidence? Because he says directly, he's not saying this in thin air. He says these are the ones who are being handled by crime intelligence, and he names them.
Yeah, they must be named. If there are journalists that are in, so that's different to listening in on journalists. If there are journalists that are actively pursuing and a part of these kinds of things that effectively brown envelope journalism, he must name them. They must be identified and they must be held accountable for their actions. Where you have a very worrying sort of idea is that you just sort of name the media house, or you imply that it might be certain people. If he's got the evidence, if he's clear that this is what's going on, that must be named and identified, and then media organizations need to be looking into that. I think outside of that, media organizations should already be investigating these things and saying, what is going on here? Is there a likelihood? These are very serious allegations. They need to be doing their own assessments of whether there's any veracity to these things. But clearly, if you're going into this kind of forum and making these kinds of allegations, put forward the evidence. Otherwise, how on earth are we meant to believe anything that you say?
Yeah, lots to get through. Lorato, I mean, the power play in the police, you and I have been speaking about this for years. From the days of Jackie Silebe, all of it, is the power play between the police and politicians. But we are seeing it yet again here, this power play. What do you make of the inability, it seems, for Police Commissioner General Fani Masemula to assert himself and his authority?
You know, Thabo, I suspect, and again, right, what we all know is that so far, none of the police commissioners have finished their term, right? And it says something about, you know, them being able to, one, execute their mandate without political interference. But also, we all understand that, you know, for instance, when General Bekele became minister, one of the things that he did in 2009 was to say, we are going to, you know, and although it was not policy, we are going to have a shoot to kill kind of approach, right? So if you are a career policeman and you are always compliant, and even, you know, the charge is for everyone to be compliant with the law, but you also have a sentiment where policemen and women always feel that we are under attack and we are not emboldened. That kind of a thing does that. So there's power play at many different levels. But also you then, you know, get the sense that to a great extent, where intelligence services in particular, where ordinarily police services would be, call it a customer, because then intelligence would collect information and are able to then share it with, you know, the relevant either police station or people who are investigating. You realize that it at least in the testimonies that have come up so far, seemingly they are not always used for what they should be intended to, but they are about advancing certain causes. And that is why you imagine certain, even journalists would say, by the way, we received this information by, you know, even one of the MPs who said he received an envelope in front of his door. And the question is, at any instance when that happens, what is the agenda? Does it mean that the police or even the crime intelligence operatives themselves feel disempowered? Because if you have to do that, it means that you know that somewhere there's a blockage, and therefore that is why you need to circumvent the regular channel that you ought to be channeling the information.
Weigh in tonight, 072-110-5584, or call us 010-594-6010. Engage with us on X on these and maybe other stories that are popping up for you in terms of the developments in the country in the past 7 days. We look forward to your engagement and we'll get into more stories. Back with our panel conversation this evening, unpacking the top stories of the past week, looking ahead to what certainly would be coming out again in the week to come. Social commentator Lerato Tsinkeng, media monitoring managing director William Bird, as well political analyst Professor Piet Kroukamp. Remember, we're taking your comments as well on WhatsApp 072-110-5584. Call us on 010-594-6010 or WhatsApp, or rather send us an X at Newzroom 405. Prof, SIU raids, as well as the Hawks raiding the home of Shadrack Sibiya, who is set to be testifying this week at the ad hoc committee. Let's start with that one. We'll come to the SIU raid afterwards. The general, the Sibiya, saying he's been treated unfairly by this. What's your analysis of the timing of that raid?
Well, like that's in your question, the timing of the raid. Just remember, one I have to assume that General Masemola were informed and give the go-ahead for somebody to be searched and possibly be arrested.
Yeah. His deputy
he has testified against.
His deputy is not just somebody.
No, it's not just somebody, it's his deputy, but it's somebody that testified against. In other words, it's as if, why didn't he act in the past? Why didn't this happen before General Bakwenazi had his press conference? In other words, this was a sleeping matter on the desk of General Masemola, and now, I think if I'm Sibiya, I don't know whether he is guilty or not, because there's no evidence yet. But if I'm Sibiya, I will rightfully be very disturbed by the timing of this and by the likeliness that it may have some bearing on the standing of my testimony before the Madlanga Commission as well as before the ad hoc committee of Parliament. It will have an influence. I think he might argue that as well tomorrow. This is very unfortunate, I think. Unfortunate in the sense that Masemola seems not to have acted for a very long time. He took his matters about the police task team, the police killing task team, he took it to the president who didn't act at all. It's as if people who do not act, it has consequences for people when it comes to the process of finding justice and finding clarity in this matter. I think it's terribly unfortunate that it happened now, not because it's too late, but because it should have happened much earlier, not because it now is the wrong time, I think. If we really want to understand what's going on, this is probably not going to assist us in understanding what's going on, because now he has something to defend. Now he will come to the ad hoc committee and say, sorry, I cannot talk about this because I have a court matter that's coming up. Sorry, I can't talk about this because I will have to appear before the Madlanga Commission and I will appear in camera there. So I would either want to appear in camera here or I can't talk about it now because I will have to testify in court. It convolutes matters, I think.
William, the tensions between the minister, Masemola, Shadrack Sibiya, Mkhwanazi, playing out in these hearings. I mean, it's what's being reported on quite broadly. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is for ordinary members of the public. It's something that you really struggle to get your head around. Looking at these people, and you wonder, so how have you been operating over the last several years?
Yeah.
Like, what on earth has actually been going on? Have you been doing your jobs to any degree or to any level? Because even if even half of these kinds of allegations are true, you kind of sit there and wonder, well, no wonder, things can't happen. People can get away with murder in many instances, quite literally, because there are all of these issues and all of these tensions, and yet they aren't being addressed. You've got intelligence services that are clearly not doing half of what they should be doing. We saw that in the ahead of the July 2021 riots, and since then you've not seen the kind of structural changes. You've got a body that has been increasingly unaccountable. There have been all of those sorts of allegations around Parliament before this. If you just think about where this has taken us, these things, like all of our challenges in South Africa, they don't just magically appear. They're things that have been coming and been building up for year after year after year. And because in many instances, Parliament has failed abjectly to do even a half or a third of its job, they allow the problems to sit there, to get bigger, to fester. So when civil society and various political parties were demanding greater accountability and greater transparency around the state security services, they needed clarity on the appointment of the Director General. They needed all of these sorts of things. And Parliament sat there and they twiddled their thumbs, or they prevaricated and they didn't do anything. Years later, the consequences of those actions we're now seeing in these particular conflicts with them. When a Parliament fails to hold the police to account, now they have these things and they're asking all these questions. Why weren't they doing this 3 years ago? So again, your other guest has pointed out that they should have been doing these things years ago. So why hasn't Parliament again been asking these same questions years and years ago? We see this. So here, this is about the police, but if you take it outside of this to the communication sector, you see exactly the same pattern being followed out. You see Parliament now going, oh my goodness, the media is in such a state, we need to be doing something. But it's not in a state that just magically appeared today. It's not an urgent thing that magically appeared. It's been building for the last decade, and this is exactly the same thing. And what it's pointing to is when you have accountability structures that are failing to do their basic tasks, you then allow these kinds of things to fester to the point that you get these kinds of crazy raids happening, all of these things exploding, when in fact, if you dealt with them systematically as they arise and getting Parliament to do its job. So in as much as we're focusing on the bad people in these particular instances, the bad people are the successive and the preceding parliaments and portfolio committees and ministers across the board that have failed completely to do any of their basic oversight access levels, from Nathi Mthethwa, who's now passed, and all of the previous people before them. This didn't just happen today. These are things that have been building and building and building, and now they're exploding, and now we're caught again in a massive crisis of institutions failing to do their job.
Yeah. Well, we take some of your calls now. Advocate Rofiwa is calling us in Pretoria. Advocate Rofiwa, good evening, welcome, and I am well. I hope you're well too. Go ahead.
Good evening, how are you doing?
I'm good.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've got a huge problem containing the appearances, these two appearances of the people at Madlanga Commission and then the Parliament. Remember, General Mukwanaz appeared, and also our police commissioner appeared, and now Sibiya is appearing on the Parliament before appearing on the Madlanga Commission. It sounds awkward, very, very unfair. Why is this one not appearing at Madlanga Commission first, like other two, what they did before?
Okay.
So it sounds like there's something that is contradicting it and something that is unfair, and it proves that our actually monitored by oligarchs and kleptocracy. We are being ruled by people. We have got their own agendas. Those hidden agendas are proven with the situations that are doing things now. There is no fairness.
All right, Advocate.
Why this one is starting on the Parliament, not at Madlanga Commission?
Asking the question, the Advocate Rofia, why is Shadrack Sibiya appearing before Parliament and not at the Madlanga Commission first? Well, I mean, the Portfolio Committee would tell you that we are the main people here. That's why they stopped that process. Don't come and bring the Madlanga statement to us here, but put our own statement here that is constituted in this Parliament. But let's go to the SIU raid. I mean, when you look at the obscene consumption of proceeds that the SIU tells us comes from the corruption at the Tembisa Hospital, have you done a study on this thing? Why is it that this corruption, when it happens, the next thing that you see is just this obscene consumption that is mind-blowing?
Thabo, I have no scientific response to that, right? But I suspect greed is at the heart of all of this. Because if you look at how majority of the cases, even if you're to look at what the National Lotteries Commission, which the SIU did exceptionally well in there in terms of investigating, tracing the money, who the beneficiaries were, and the likes. Even celebrities, who would have benefited from that kind of, thievery. I think it talks a lot about how people, one, and William talks to this, when accountability mechanisms and institutions crumble, people almost think that they can always push the envelope. And that is why, because people then believe that, we can get away with this. You are not seeing when people steal 50 rands, they go to jail. People steal 50 million rands, they can easily go and brag about it. In fact, you see this a lot on social media where it is, and it does not have to be true, right? Where you see people would be saying, when you see people showing off bills of obscene amounts where they spend, which would be spent on alcohol, it is because that's a laundromat situation. And I think it tells us a lot that even South Africans are becoming, call it, almost numb to this thing where we are now accepting that when you see people, splurging on expensive alcohol, splurging on a number of things, and we even characterize it as laundromats or people washing money. We are getting the sense that we are accepting that there are many people who are earning money in the not so honorable way, and they have a way of ensuring that it looks and feels legitimate.
Looking
and
at the conversations that are happening on social, because I know you monitor that quite closely, how people are talking about what has been uncovered there. Do these raids, this exposure, help?
So one, the SIU is literally getting a lot of, call it, people are very excited about the work that the SIU is doing, because there's a track record that, they are demonstrating that whenever they would have done an investigation, they are able to, get back some of the money. But of course, there's also a sentiment around we've seen Edwin Sodi's cars were taken, but the guy is still popping champagne here and there. So in a way, there's the tension between, it's good that we are seeing that property is being seized, but we are not seeing these people being held accountable, or at least being in orange overalls. And the other conversation that people are having is more really around the worry that while, or at least while there's excitement that somebody like a Babita Deokaran at least is being vindicated, but they're still worried about, is this emboldening people who want to be whistleblowers? Because we know that, at least the genesis of this was somebody who had the courage to raise their voice, flag transactions, and be able to say that I'm seeing something wrong here. But they're worried about people's lives continue to be in danger, and the Protected Disclosures Act still does not seem to be doing a lot more to embolden people. And I think that's something that we should always be thinking about, to say, how do we embolden a lot more people to want to come up and give, their own side of all of these things that are creating and contributing to the rot in the system.
We'll take a break, and when we continue, we'll wrap up the conversation with our panel tonight, and of course taking more of your thoughts on X at Newzroom 405, on WhatsApp 072-110-5584. Otherwise, we can take your calls tonight on 010-594-6010. Back in a moment. Thanks for staying on the late edition. Still with us, Lorato Tsekeng, William Bird, as well as Professor Okamp, and of course, you at home participating in our conversation. Let's go to some of your WhatsApp messages that have come through this evening. Anonymous saying, good evening, Thabo. I was very disappointed by the way the lawmakers were asking questions. South Africans, if this is the best we have sent to Parliament, then we are in trouble. Generals went to this structure with the mind of getting some form of help. I did not hear anyone asking how they could help. People were interested in some sort of party politics, which I think South Africans are not interested in. I'm disappointed. Is it disappointing there? Mainstream media has successfully protected Hangwani Maumera's identity. I hope you're not party to this mischief. Investigative journalism is on holiday. Anonymous, the confusion over the passing of the SA ambassador to France, though it's last week, the fact that he allegedly fell from the 22nd floor, not a single person saw him falling, even when he hit the balcony. Nobody heard the bang. Not a single guest heard or saw something. are some of the questions that are being asked. Prof. Okamp, let's talk about that. I mean, a little bit. The ANC saying, well, we'll give our ambassador a dignified send-off, right? While, of course, the government itself is battling to conjure up some sort of dignity with all these commissions and inquiries that are going on. Talk about that oxymoron.
I can't think of a single commissioner of police that weren't implicated in some form of crime. Becky Kelly has been implicated by both these commissions, the ad hoc committee as well as the commission. And for years, there has been accusations that he's been too close to organized crime in the taxi industry. Now he was also too close to organized crime in the tenderpreneurship, in other words, his close relationship with Kat Matlala. And that goes for virtually each and every ANC politician, and it also goes for each and every commissioner. There's always this cloud of corruption. And now the thing is, what has changed from the state capture years? The state capture years were the plundering of state institutions. But now what we get is a paramilitary surge towards the allocation of resources within the state. In other words, these guys come with big guns. They militarize. It's automatic rifles. They kill each other. They whack each other. If you today offer yourself as somebody who knows something on the inside, a whistleblower, you play with your own life. I think it was Makenazi who said that you have to disband parts of the police force. In fact, I think you have to disband the whole police force. It is not possible, right from the minister. And if you listen carefully, the Commissioner of Police keep on saying that he cannot necessarily resist the urges of the minister because he reports to the minister. He doesn't report to the minister. He's being appointed by the president. But he has the fear that if he resists the minister's will, the minister will report him to the president and the president will remove him. Masemola went to the president and he told him what's going on. He got no feedback that in some other way explained to him his situation vis-a-vis the minister. The president just appeared absent from this. But do you see how the police is incriminated and criminalized, and in the process politicians, they create a protective cocon, somewhere with a place where these criminals feel safe in the knowing that there will be no oversight, there will be no prosecutions. Let me give you one last example. Today and tomorrow, today and yesterday and the day before that, day before that, day before that, and tomorrow, around about between 60 and 70 people will be killed in South Africa. They'll be murdered. Of that 70 people that was murdered today, 7 of them will eventually, their case will end up in court. There was some form of justice. And the same applies to each and every day, the last 365 days. And every day, around about 60 people committed the murder and got away with it. It tells you about the police, it tells you about the intelligence, it tells you about the minister, it tells you about the Hawks, it tells you about the NPA, and it tells you about the ANC, it tells you about the government. That's exactly where we are.
Yeah. Well, what do we make of the certainly appearance of media in some of these conversations? For example, even if you would have listened to Shadrack Sibiya when the raid was happening at his home, he says, well, I mean, they phoned you first and told you that they are coming here because the aim is to intimidate me and also to tarnish my reputation. But there seemed to be some kind of link to say, well, media are being used to an extent also in this fight that is happening.
It's a job of media.
Sorry, Professor William. Sorry. Yeah, William, go ahead.
So I think that in that instance, you know, we've seen them, the SIU do this before, many years ago, usually, where they invite media along to the raid of a prominent person or household in order to witness. And that, I think, is clearly a PR stunt by them in order to say, look, we want to show you that we're doing our job. We want you to see the issues that we are taking, the resources that we are capturing as part of the work that we're doing. And that is an important aspect to show justice seemingly seen to be done. You know, so I don't think that in and of itself that's a bad thing. I don't think that it was necessarily also something that clearly didn't favor their particular position in relation to Mr. Sibiya. So, I think that going to have a legitimate claim to say that that may have harmed his reputation. Of course, if they've got their issues and they've got all of their paperwork in line, I don't think that he's got a leg to stand on. But of course, the media and the role that the media have played in this, again, is that many of these issues would not have been brought to light had it not been for our news organizations. Does that mean that all of them are completely squeaky clean, or that some of these allegations may not be true? I think given where we are in South Africa with the high levels of corruption, it may well be true. The key then is for us to make sure that we root those out, identify those people, and allow media to continue to do their job.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Time always the enemy, man. There's so much more which could certainly unpack. But let me appreciate you all for coming on this evening. That's Lorato Nsekeng, William Bird, as well as Professor Okam. And thanks to you as well for your engagement. Right.